Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, the presidential candidates continue their final pushes on the campaign trail, this time paying a visit to the Lone Star State. And children who have coughs that linger could be dealing with walking pneumonia. We'll take a look at what doctors are doing to combat the issue.
And we're seeing a little bit of cloud cover out there. Temperatures right now are still in the 70s and 80s, but we will cool off. Details in a few minutes.
Dedicated to southern and eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. With the election just a week and a half away, the presidential race is looking like a dead heat. Both candidates are rallying in Texas today. CBS's Nicole Skenga has the latest.
More than 31 million Americans have already cast their ballots as early voting picks up momentum across the states. That includes battleground North Carolina.
For me to be able to have that voice and to be able to have power today to be able to vote was really important.
On the campaign trail, former President Donald Trump headed to Texas to tape an interview with popular podcast host Joe Rogan. Arriving in Austin, he hammered his signature issue, border control.
We're like a dumping ground. What Kamala Harris has done on our border is cruel, it's vile, and it's absolutely heartless. Her policy of importing migrant gangs is a crime against our country. It's actually a crime against humanity.
Vice President Kamala Harris is also in Texas. The state is solidly red, but her campaign is using the visit to keep the focus on one of its most powerful messages. Harris will be joined by Beyoncé at a rally in Houston tonight, where she plans to spotlight reproductive rights.
This is not just some theoretical concept. Real harm has occurred in our country. A real suffering has occurred. People have died.
It's a theme she brought to Georgia on Thursday, blaming Trump for the medical consequences of abortion bans.
And notice Donald Trump still refuses to even acknowledge the pain and the suffering.
It's a message Harris hopes will reach beyond Texas and into the battleground states as the two campaigns fight for an edge in the final days of the race. Nicole Skenga, CBS News, Washington.
From Texas, Trump heads to Michigan for a rally in Traverse City this evening. The race for the White House is tied heading into the final stretch. In the last nationwide CNN poll before votes are counted, it's showing Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are even. Each has 47% of likely voters supporting them. CNN polling has tracked a tight race throughout the short campaign between Harris and Trump. A September poll was nearly identical to the new poll, with likely voters split 48% for Harris and 47% for Trump. As the cost of just about everything has crept up and up, Americans are now thinking about how inflation could change under the country's next president. After inflation soared to its highest level in decades, it's become a key factor in the 2024 presidential race, and both of the major candidates say they have plans to fix it.
On my first day back in the Oval Office, I will sign an executive order directing every cabinet secretary and agency head to use every tool and authority at their disposal to defeat inflation and to bring consumer prices rapidly down.
We will lower costs, including on everything from health care to groceries. I will take on corporate price gouging. I've done it before and I'll do it again.
Young families have a harder time raising kids than previous generations. Increasing costs of child care, an unbalanced work-family dynamic, and fewer resources make it tough. More than half of the country lives in a child care desert. Dawn Hucklebridge with Paid Leave for All says 1 in 4 women do not have paid leave. It's an issue that is forcing mothers to choose between their careers or their children.
Which means that 1 in 4 women have gone back to work within just 2 weeks of giving birth. And if you think about it, you can't even check children into a child care center at that early in life.
Hucklebridge says a Kamala Harris win will be a victory for women because she understands their struggles of being a mother and balancing a career and raising children. But Tiffany Justice, co-founder of Moms for Liberty, believes Trump is a family man who understands the economics of supporting young kids. This week, the phones of former President Donald Trump and vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance were targeted by hackers linked to the Chinese government. Trump and Vance were among a group of people impacted in what sources say is part of a much broader cyber espionage effort aimed at high-level U.S. targets. It was not immediately clear what data, if any, the hackers were able to access. There continues to be long lines at some early voting locations in East Tennessee. Election officials say if you plan to vote early, you might want to try a location that's usually not as busy. You can cast your ballot at any early voting location in the county where you are registered in East Tennessee. Next Thursday is the last day for early voting in Tennessee. Of course, the dates are different in each state. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has asked the Supreme Court to pull his name from the ballot in the battleground state of Michigan. This is the former independent presidential candidate's latest long-shot appeal to the High Court. The filing came days after he made the same appeal to the Supreme Court over Wisconsin's ballot. Election officials in both pivotal states will file a brief at the High Court responding to Kennedy on Monday. A federal agency has closed its investigation into Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration said yesterday that a claim RFK Jr. decapitated a dead whale carcass 2 decades ago was unfounded. No other information related to the investigation was announced. Last month, Kennedy said at a campaign event in Arizona that he got a letter informing him that he was under investigation by the agency. Republicans plan to appeal a Pennsylvania State Supreme Court mail-in voting decision to the U.S. Supreme Court. The state Supreme Court ordered the counting of provisional ballots cast by eligible voters whose mail ballots were rejected for technical defects. A filing from Republican National Committee lawyers indicated they would seek U.S. Supreme Court intervention. The filing asked the state Supreme Court to pause the ruling until the High Court can step in. Former Abercrombie & Fitch CEO Mike Jeffries was arraigned in a Long Island courtroom today. Jeffries, who led the clothing company for more than 20 years, entered a not guilty plea to 1 count of sex trafficking and 15 counts of prostitution. Jeffries was arrested earlier this week and accused in a 16-count indictment of operating an international prostitution ring that exploited men. He was later released on a $10 million bond.
TGIF, the weekend is here, and it was a beautiful start to the weekend, as right now we have a mixture of sun and clouds out there, mainly sunny skies. This is the scene over towards the Buffalo Mountain Cam. You can see right there, nothing to really talk about at this hour. And then same story over towards portions of Knott County. When that comes up, there's Knott County right there. You can see again from the Kentucky Mesonet site there, a beautiful fall evening. You can see the leaves changing colors, and right now we're seeing temperatures in the 70s and 80s for the most part, mid to upper 60s towards Wise, low 60s towards Grundy. That wind is staying out of the south and southwest, which is allowing those temperatures to be unseasonably warm for this time of year. And right now, all is quiet across eastern Kentucky for the most part on live pinpoint Doppler radar. We do see a little bit of a stray shower over towards Monticello. We'll go ahead and pinpoint this little cell right here in Monticello. But other than that, that's it across eastern Kentucky as of now, but that will change as we go throughout the next several hours, as rain chances will be in the forecast, not just for tonight, but in the overnight hours and into the early morning hours of your Saturday. Once that front pushes through, the rain chances will dwindle down and it will be substantially cooler. There's 2 o'clock. We'll see temperatures in the 50s and low 60s. Now, we will stay cool this weekend, but there is another warming trend coming up. The question is, how will it impact Halloween? Details on the first alert forecast in a few minutes. Steve.
All right, Eric, thank you. Children who have coughs that go on for weeks could be dealing with walking pneumonia, which has been surging in the U.S. this year. Infectious disease experts say it could result in those children needing a different antibiotic regimen to treat it. CNN's Ivan Rodriguez has more.
Walking pneumonia is caused by a bacteria called Mycoplasma pneumoniae, and cases are spiking this year, especially among preschool-aged children, potentially for a few reasons.
One is better diagnostic test. Number 2, it's cyclical. We do see an increase in the fall, late summer, early fall. And number 3 is it's getting actually back to pre-pandemic levels.
Between the end of March and the start of October of this year, U.S. Emergency Department visits for pneumonia related to the bacteria increased significantly, especially for 2 to 4-year-olds and 5 to 17-year-olds, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Dr. Danny Brandstetter, the medical director of infectious disease at Wellstar Kennestone Hospital outside Atlanta, says the go-to antibiotic for pneumonia is amoxicillin. But since mycoplasma isn't treated by amoxicillin, doctors are using other antibiotics.
We often call it azithromycin. People may know that as a Z-Pak, is often treated this type of pneumonia.
Dr. Brandstetter says the good news is that a majority of kids and young adults will get over a mycoplasma infection without treatment. Still, parents can keep an eye on these symptoms and make sure prevention is a priority.
Parents should be on the lookout for a dry cough and maybe persistent over several days. And the kids may not be severely ill, but may feel crummy. Now, don't forget the prevention is cover your cough and sneezes and make sure you wash those hands.
In Atlanta, I'm Ivan Rodriguez reporting.
Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, we find out if a product designed to work harder to remove stains does what it's supposed to do.
And we have high school football tonight and Kentucky football tomorrow. And I'll have those forecasts coming up in a few minutes. Stay with us.